So what does the future hold for Northern Ireland? Interesting question, and I think we've still got a way to go in terms of if we're serious about this right across Northern Ireland, the things we have to put in place. I suppose to start with, it's really taking on board what is already in place and what is already in play with their existing legacy. And really, the way we have to view this is that we see water at the minute as being an issue. We look at a site, we look at redevelopment, we say, well, here's all the things we have to deal with. We have to deal with traffic, we have to deal with the file flow, we have to deal with storm runoff. So we very much see it as an issue, not as an asset. And really the idea of channeling water into a pipe where we quickly as possible get that off to the river is low performance. That infrastructure is serving only a single purpose of conveying water away from site. So it leads to various things in terms of pollution of water courses. It leads to flooding, and we're all well aware, both in Belfast and elsewhere across the country, in terms of not just fluvial flooding from rivers, but surface water flooding, whenever our urban sewage networks no longer have the capacity to take the water. And to add misery to top of misery, we have climate change. We currently adopt in Northern Ireland a figure around about 10%, but it's interesting to compare that, contrast that with what's happening elsewhere in UK and Ireland. Ireland now, the predictions are up to about 30%. Elsewhere in England, we're now looking at 40% as the adopted climate change percentage. And Scotland have pushed the envelope even further again. Depending where you are in the country, it's up to 60 and 70%. So it's interesting to see where we are on that timeline. We do have aging infrastructure. There's no way around that, and it is going to need capital investment to keep us even at a status quo. So it's thinking outside the box and thinking about what else we can do about trying to make that infrastructure that we have more resilient. There's some interesting news releases over the last couple of years in terms of NI Water and the existing capacities of our sewer systems. Even if you go onto the NI Water website and do a Google on that, you'll very quickly find a list of infrastructure, both the network and also the wastewater treatment works that are either at already or reaching capacity. That very much is going to stifle the economic development of what we have as an economy, and we need to find a way around that. So that may well be governed around significant capital expenditure in upgrading parts of the network and the wastewater treatment works, but that certainly doesn't tell the whole story. We're looking at extensions of development catchments. We're looking at densification, both in terms of population centres and development in terms of inner city, where any green space that we had is slowly getting nibbled away at, where we're left with very much a hard landscape. So that on top of the increasing environmental requirements, so as we're increasing pressure on our existing systems, we're also increasing the requirements that we're required to meet environmentally in terms of combined sewer overflow spills and reduction in the levels of pollution that we're generating. So where do we go? It's what can we do? We can start by reducing water use, the demand on the water supply systems that are also sort of creaking at capacity at times. Thankfully, we're a country that has the privilege of receiving thin air rainfall, and I've had a good bit of over the last couple of months. But before that, we had extended periods of drought, and if they had been extended much longer, we would have been in a much different situation. So it's dealing with those extremes. Now, I mentioned that in terms of how we move forward with all this, very much one way and one approach would be to upsize all of and renew all of our existing infrastructure. But for me, that shouldn't be the sole answer around this. We should be looking at every individual single opportunity to reduce and remove stormwater entering our sewer networks. so entering our combined, primarily in where we get most environmental pollution through combined sewer overflows, but also storm systems. If we can slow that down, we release and reduce the pressure that is currently applied in those sorts of systems. So we have to both think about that and also the wider context. We know that by further densification, we're reducing the potential for biodiversity, increasing island heat effect, and that in general, as mentioned in the previous presentation, can have a significant impact on health and well-being. So what we're actually looking for in terms of how we move forward, and the aspiration here is we want rainfall to be an asset on our development in our towns and cities, and that asset will lead to wider benefits. It'll become high performance infrastructure, so serving more than one purpose. The infrastructure itself is making provision for amenity and biodiversity, and generally in very loose terms, it's just making our towns and cities more pleasant places to be and live. And I think over the last couple of months, we're all very much appreciating our immediate surrounds within sort of 1 kilometre radius of our front doorstep. And no longer do we have to be sitting there wishing for the 2 weeks in summer where we jet off somewhere. We're very much more focused and attention being drawn to what is in our immediate surrounds. So we need to look at ways of integrating, and placemaking is very much the terminology we need to move to in terms of making the places that we live and work and bring up our families more pleasant places to be in. So what's changing? I know that it's been mentioned previously that Belfast City Council and Derry, Strabane, are very much at the forefront of this in terms of leading forward. The draft plan strategy and the local development plan for Belfast City Council has this policy embedded within it, ENV5. So that's available on the internet for anybody that wants to go and have a look at it. And that very much is focused around the delivery of sustainable drainage systems. So it's very much saying that here's what we want. We want to make sure that we manage flood risk. We want good water quality. And overall, we want our places that we live to be much more pleasant. That very much ties and cross-references with green infrastructure policies and a range of other policies that all very much are singing off the same hymn book. Just very much in passing, that's supported by a range of supplementary planning guidance documents that are in development. We have been involved in producing, along with partners, Robert Bray Associates, and producing a SUDS SPG for Belfast. So hopefully you'll be seeing that in the coming months. So why has this not happened to date? There's certainly a number of misconceptions and misunderstandings out in the industry. We get constant feedback that SUDS are land hungry. Permanent payment's no good because it will clog. Can't use SUDS because it needs infiltration, and surely all of Northern Ireland's covered in clay. We certainly can't use it in brownfield sites, and everybody's going to drown. And the expense is too much. But really, this is all coming from a different place, and we have to assess who's making these remarks and why they're making them. The evidence that's been done is very much that well-designed SUDS can be built anywhere on any particular site. It can be the approach is flexible enough. There's enough different types of SUDS features that can be integrated into any type of development and any situation, whether it be brownfield sites or in clay sites. What we're really saying is that we choose and select the most appropriate SUDS features for the typology of the development, and we account for the geology or any other constraints by how we encounter that design. So we're really mimicking the natural drainage processes on the site, and that's the way we should be leading forward with this. Just a couple of Belfast examples. For anybody who's eagle-eyed, they'll probably already know where these are. Top left is a flat roof that's been done into a green roof, and very much the driver there given its location and trying to basically marry in with the surrounding landscape. That's up in North Belfast at a sports facility, and it's really there to try and give a sense of, if you're looking at it from above, you're seeing it as part of the landscape, not standing out from the landscape. But it will provide other benefits. That's just been it's a sedum mix on the green roof there, and it's not established just yet. It's just been installed, so we expect that to establish over the next couple of years. Well, the other two are much more hard landscape. A couple of examples of permanent pavement. The one on the right is a podium deck with permanent pavement on top down Adelaide Street, middle of Belfast. The other one is on the bottom left, is in Newton Abbey. Again, the idea of permanent pavement failing after a couple of years. Haven't been able to get the exact date of installation, but I reckon it's probably getting on for 15 years plus that Marks and Spencer's up in the Abbey Centre has now been constructed. Somebody's probably going to be able to tell me the exact date on the chat box, I would imagine. So we're really moving the whole language away from drainage engineering and seeing this as a solely a drainage discipline into something that's quite different. We work with landscape architects, and we put our own slant on different things. But we see this as placemaking. We need to see things visually on the surface as somewhere that's pleasant to be. So the photograph you see there is a retrofit situation it's in an area of social deprivation in the middle of London. It's where I called Haringey. And visiting that site, that's how it looked. And the idea was that this is also an area of surface water flood risk. So it's provide additional resilience for water to go rather than flooding the residents, to use these underused green spaces to provide more fun and play opportunity, but also provide more drainage. So the idea was that areas were hollowed out to create little swale type arrangements. You can see there the stepping stones and different play apparatus. That's not essentially part of the drainage infrastructure. The landscape becomes the drainage infrastructure, and on the top right of the picture you see a little gaping basket. That is essentially the head wall for water leaving the system. So in terms of that, we've managed to disconnect all of the downpipes, and any additional water coming into that area will tend to pond in the suds area rather than where it is at the minute, where the ground area has been slightly higher than the elevated buildings, head of the buildings. So it's providing further flood resilience for the buildings. And that's my standing on a slight slope, taking a photograph and not remembering to steady myself. So you can see there, again, there's a couple of courtyards in that development. It's a small scheme, but it does cumulatively will start to have a bit of an impact on the sewer system. And we've looked at wider catchment modelling and been able to demonstrate the significance of impact that this can start to have if it's rolled out and opportunities are taken as they come along across a wider catchment. Again, a bit of outside their own council buildings, so they haven't just hidden away in the middle of a housing estate somewhere. The council here have taken a park, again, the footfall and the green infrastructure potential, and the capital, natural capital was quite low in this. And they've reinvigorated that through new planting, but also taking all of the water from the footpath and from the highway into the adjacent park. So this is now how it looks. And you can just about make out some of the infrastructure and the inlets coming from the highway. So rather than water going into the pipe, it's channeled into the surrounding park where most of that water is lost. It irrigates and feeds the plants, and then any residual will go back to the sewer, but at a much slower pace and a much reduced volume. Again, a couple more examples where you have situations where it's very high density situations. This is on the right, it's a bioretention area, and water going in through the gaps in the curbs. So we still have an upstanding curb there, but water is allowed to passage through the gaps and into the bioretention area, which essentially will reduce the volume runoff and also remove the pollutants that goes to storm sewer and then to the local river. The picture on the right is a series, you can see one of them in the foreground. It's a series of tree pits. So unlike the conventional approach that we've seen taken to date in many situations, this tree pit isn't irrigated by sort of a water supply pipe. It's irrigated by runoff from both the footpath and also the highway. So you can see the channels leading in the picture into so there's quite a bit of infrastructure below that, and the roots here, we've moved away from the old idea of trees only needing 1 cubic meter to grow. You're getting on to 15, 20 cubic meters in these situations for that root ball to expand and for the roots to go out into. And the water supply from there means that the roots themselves aren't going seeking sewers and other places on which to actually get root ingress into. Because they're getting a ready and plentiful supply of water, we're finding that the roots stay in place. So our current challenge around all of this is that we have to come up with a big overarching strategy to have a significant impact on surf flows, and both the reduction on existing capacities and building resilience for future capacity. So it's not just about retaining the status quo, we have to think about the future and the effects of climate change. This is not going to be solved by SUDS alone. I think that should be a point that's made right at the beginning. There will be capital investment around sort of capital schemes and upgrades of wastewater treatment works and certain significant increases in around the actual networks themselves. But certainly we should be looking at optimizing that investment and bringing into the mix a range of retrofit and redevelopment opportunities where we can reduce that flow and the impact on the flows on existing networks. Most SUDs, we haven't gone into detail today, but most SUDs will generate interception losses, by which I mean that the SUDs themselves, the water that goes in is more than the water that will come out, because some of that water is getting lost within the vegetation. It sort of gets soaked up by the soil, even within permeable pavement. And right across a range of SUDS features, you get these sort of interception where some of that water is intercepted and lost within the system. And that's contributing to reduction of violent heat effects. It's feeding the plants and providing natural irrigation. So there's a range of benefits there. Now, our challenges that remain, we're currently providing training for water authorities right across England as they move towards adoption of a range of SUDS techniques. And Scotland have already been there for the last couple of decades, getting on for at this point in terms of adoption of SUDS features. In Northern Ireland, we very much, NI Water have taken the stance that they will adopt hard engineered SUDS, i.e. oversized pipes and tanks, but the range of other techniques that we can adopt and provide for placemaking very much sits out on its own, and we still have to tackle that in terms of how that will be managed in the long term. But in saying that, it's a challenge we have to sort of front up to, because the benefits that we appreciate from having green infrastructure type features within our towns and cities, as was mentioned in the earlier presentation, we can't lose that sight of those wider benefits and bringing that into the palette of our design and what we're trying to achieve and what our local development plans are striving for. So we need to find ways of overcoming those challenges. So to round up, and thanks for your time to date, to affect change, it's really about looking at how we provide green infrastructure, not just on the periphery development or within parks, but right throughout the fabric of our towns and cities, and how we both remove and slow flow at source. And the whole idea that SUDS very much not just contribute, but can become the focal point of placemaking. The scheme that you can see in the background of this slide was originally intended as a regeneration scheme. And the school, which is a preschool, so that's 3 and 4 year olds, very much the headmaster was of the opinion that this should not just be about all hard landscape. But he wanted his kids and the kids that played in the local playground on the other side of the street to essentially experience water in the middle of London, and to experience it, that would be tangible, that they could see water and see how the processes worked. So the large basin you see in the central part of the picture, it's very rare you see presence of water, but on the odd occasion, it's not just about looking at it. You can use the wiggly wall to walk right through the Suds Basin. So very much it's gone from Suds being not just part of the scheme, but the focal part of the placemaking in that scheme. So we need to educate perceptions. I was standing in as part of the group whenever they opened the scheme, the official opening, where the local mayor, as part of Hammersmith Film, told all people in attendance that this scheme was going to solve all the flood issues in London, which probably was overarching in terms of the aspiration of the scheme, granted, but he certainly had bought into the idea and bought into the ethos of the approach. So to sort of round up, the future drainage infrastructure, we by all means have to link that into green infrastructure. For me, they are very much, the green-blue infrastructure is very much one and the same in terms of how we should be seeing our future infrastructure, and take all opportunities to provide that as part of placemaking. And for me, that then links back into multifunctionality, and we maximise the performance. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll be sticking around for question and answers.